The grand ballroom of the upscale corporate venue was transformed into a winter wonderland. Twinkling lights draped across the ceiling, casting a soft, magical glow over the space. The scent of cinnamon and pine hung in the air, blending with the faint sound of classic Christmas carols playing from a live string quartet in the corner. Red, green, and gold decorations adorned every surface, from the elegantly wrapped presents under the towering Christmas tree to the holly wreaths hung along the walls. It was the perfect setting for celebration, or at least it seemed that way on the surface. "Merry Christmas, everyone," the CEO announced, his voice booming through the microphone as he raised a glass. Laughter erupted, glasses clinked, and festive cheers echoed in response. Yet, amidst the joyous ambience, an undercurrent of tension rippled through certain guests. At the heart of this cheer stood Emma, a vision of elegance in her emerald green cocktail dress, her dark hair pinned into a sophisticated updo. Her laugh was bright and charming, the kind that made heads turn. She exuded confidence and warmth, but beneath her polished exterior, something flickered, a hint of distraction. Emma's gaze darted across the room, frequently landing on one man, Jacob, the company's charismatic CFO. His sharp suit, easy smile, and undeniable presence made him the center of attention. Yet there was an intensity in his eyes tonight, especially when they met Emma's. Their connection wasn't lost on the observant few, though most dismissed it as professional camaraderie. As Emma gracefully moved from one conversation to another, she noticed a familiar face entering through the grand double doors. Her husband, Daniel. He wasn't supposed to be here, not tonight. He had told her he had an emergency meeting in another city, and she hadn't questioned it. Yet, here he was, his presence an unexpected twist that sent a ripple of anxiety through her. Daniel stood tall, scanning the crowd, his eyes searching for Emma. His broad shoulders were tense beneath his tailored suit, and his usual calm demeanor was replaced with something more determined. He hadn't planned to come, but a gnawing feeling had taken root in him over the past few days. His gut told him something wasn't right, and tonight he intended to find out. As Emma approached him, her heart pounded. She plastered on a smile, though her mind raced for answers. "Daniel, I didn't expect to see you tonight. I thought you were out of town." Daniel's eyes softened as he leaned in to kiss her cheek, but there was an edge to his voice. "The meeting got canceled. I figured I'd surprise you." He glanced around the room. "Looks like quite the party." Emma's grip tightened around her champagne flute. "It is. Everyone's in high spirits." Her voice wavered slightly, and she cursed herself internally. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked, his brow furrowed. "You seem uneasy." Before Emma could respond, Jacob approached with a broad smile. "Daniel, it's great to see you. Emma didn't mention you'd be joining us tonight." He extended his hand, his grip firm and confident. Daniel returned the handshake, but didn't miss the brief flicker in Jacob's eyes when they met his. "Last-minute change of plans," Daniel said, his tone measured. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Jacob replied, though his posture stiffened slightly. "The more, the merrier." Emma's heart raced. She could feel the tension between the two men, even if it was masked by polite smiles. She knew Daniel was perceptive, and she had no doubt he'd sense something off. She excused herself, her mind racing for a way to steer the evening back on course. As she made her way across the room, she felt a hand on her arm. Turning, she saw her close friend and colleague, Sarah, whose expression was a mix of concern and curiosity. "Emma, is everything okay?" "You look flustered," Sarah whispered. Emma hesitated before nodding. "Everything's fine. Daniel just surprised me, that's all." Sarah's eyes flicked to Daniel, who stood across the room, his gaze still locked onto Jacob. "Are you sure? Because it seems like he's not the only one watching Jacob tonight." Emma's stomach tightened. She forced a smile. "It's nothing, just holiday stress." Sarah didn't look convinced, but nodded. "If you need anything, I'm here." As the night progressed, The festive atmosphere grew heavier with unspoken words and stolen glances. Emma felt trapped between the life she had with Daniel and the complications brought on by her growing closeness with Jacob. And then, the microphone crackled to life again. This time, it was Jacob who stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone for their hard work this year. This company thrives because of each and every one of you. His eyes briefly found Emma in the crowd. Tonight is about celebrating our successes and the people who make it all possible. The applause that followed was thunderous, but Emma barely heard it. All she could focus on was the storm brewing around her. Little did she know, the evening was far from over, and the real storm was yet to come. The party roared on, but for Emma, every moment felt heavier than the last. The clinking of glasses, bursts of laughter, and festive music became a backdrop to the growing storm inside her mind. Her eyes darted between Daniel, who was mingling with other guests, but frequently stealing glances in her direction, and Jacob, whose calm demeanor belied a subtle tension. Emma tried to remain composed. She floated through conversations with ease, her smile unwavering, but internally, she was unraveling. The room felt smaller with every passing minute, and the weight of unspoken truths loomed over her. She knew Daniel sensed something, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could maintain the facade. Near the bar, Daniel stood with Sarah's husband, Tom, a jovial man with a hearty laugh. Daniel nodded politely as Tom recounted a story about last year's Christmas party, but his attention kept shifting back to Emma and Jacob. "Everything okay, Daniel?" Tom asked, raising an eyebrow. "You seem a little distracted." Daniel hesitated. "Yeah, just it's been a long day. Emma wasn't expecting me, and I'm getting the feeling I might have thrown her off." Tom chuckled. "Surprises can do that. But hey, maybe she's just worried about impressing you. These corporate events can get a little political." Daniel nodded, though his thoughts lingered elsewhere. There was something more. He could feel it. Meanwhile, Emma found herself cornered near the dessert table by Jacob. His usual charm was replaced by a more serious tone. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. She glanced around nervously. "Not here. Not now." Jacob stepped closer, his voice a whisper. "He knows something. I can see it in his eyes. Are you sure he wasn't tipped off?" Emma's heart pounded. "No one knows. It's just a coincidence. He wasn't supposed to be here tonight." "A coincidence?" Jacob scoffed. "Emma, Daniel showing up unannounced on the very night we—" "Stop." Emma cut him off, her eyes pleading. "Please, Jacob. Just let it go for now. We'll figure this out later." Jacob hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But if he confronts you, we need to be prepared." As Jacob walked away, Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself. She turned to grab a glass of champagne, only to find Sarah standing there, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Emma, what's going on with you and Jacob?" Sarah asked, lowering her voice. Emma froze, her mind racing for a plausible excuse. "What do you mean?" "Come on. I've known you for years. There's something between you two. And Daniel's been watching you all night. Is there something you're not telling me?" Emma forced a laugh. "You're reading too much into things. Jacob and I have worked closely all year. It's nothing more than that." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "If you say so. But if you're in trouble, you know you can trust me, right?" Emma nodded, grateful for the lifeline, even if she couldn't take it. "Thanks, Sarah. But everything's fine." Despite her reassurances, Emma could feel the walls closing in. Not long after, Daniel crossed paths with a junior employee named Claire. She was new, young, and clearly nervous about attending her first big company event. Claire hesitated before speaking, her eyes flicking toward Emma and Jacob. "Mr. Daniels," she started, her voice soft. "I don't mean to intrude, but I think you should know something's been off between Emma and Mr. Jacob for a while now." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Off how?" Claire hesitated, biting her lip. I've seen them together late at night in the office. They say it's work-related, but I thought you should know. Daniel's stomach twisted. He thanked Claire and moved away, his mind now racing with doubt and suspicion. He needed to confront Emma, but not here, not yet. The music shifted to a slower tune, and the dance floor filled with couples. Daniel watched as Jacob extended his hand to Emma. She hesitated for a brief moment, then took it, allowing herself to be led onto the floor. They moved gracefully, but the proximity between them was closer than necessary, their whispered conversation too intense for a casual dance. Daniel felt a surge of anger. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to storm onto the floor. Instead, he turned to Tom. "Does Emma usually dance with Jacob at these things?" Daniel asked, his voice strained. Tom shrugged. "They've danced before, but tonight feels different. You okay?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "No, I'm not." As the song ended, Emma and Jacob returned to the crowd, unaware of the growing suspicion swirling around them. Daniel approached Emma, his voice calm but laced with tension. "Can we talk?" he asked, his eyes locked on hers. Emma hesitated, then nodded. Of course. They moved to a quieter corner of the room. Before Daniel could speak, Emma launched into a preemptive defense. "I know what you're thinking, but it's not what it looks like," she said quickly. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Then tell me, Emma, what is it? Because Claire seems to think you and Jacob have been spending a lot of late nights together." Emma's heart sank. "Claire? She's mistaken. Jacob and I have had to work late for projects. That's all." Daniel studied her, his jaw clenched. "And the dance? The whispers?" "Emma, I'm not blind." Before she could respond, Jacob appeared. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, his tone calm but challenging. Daniel stepped forward, his eyes flashing with anger. "No, Jacob. Everything is not okay." The music, once vibrant and festive, now seemed like a distant hum, drowned out by the sudden tension in the room. All eyes turned toward the corner where Daniel, Emma, and Jacob stood locked in a silent standoff. Daniel's face was a mask of controlled fury, his breathing shallow as he processed the sight before him. Emma stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear and guilt, while Jacob maintained a calm, almost defiant expression. The festive atmosphere around them shattered like glass under the weight of the unspoken truth. "Daniel," Emma whispered, stepping forward, her voice trembling. "Please, let's not do this here." But Daniel wasn't listening. His gaze shifted between her and Jacob, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think I don't see what's going on?" His voice was low, dangerous, but loud enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one dared to intervene. Tom and Sarah exchanged worried glances, inching closer, unsure of whether to step in. Jacob finally spoke, his voice steady but laced with warning. "Daniel, this isn't the time or place." Daniel's eyes flashed with rage. "The time? The place? You've been spending late nights with my wife, whispering in corners and dancing like... His voice caught, unable to finish the sentence. Emma reached for his arm, but he pulled away sharply. "Don't touch me, Emma. Not until you tell me the truth. Is there something going on between you two?" The room fell deathly silent. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing for the right words. She glanced at Jacob, whose stoic expression offered no support. Finally, she took a deep breath. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice cracking. "Jacob and I, there's nothing inappropriate." Daniel's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Inappropriate? That's the word you're going with? Emma, I've been watching you two all night. The way you look at each other, the whispers, the late nights. Don't insult my intelligence." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. "Daniel, please, let's talk about this privately." Before he could respond, Claire, the junior employee, stepped forward hesitantly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just thought Mr. Daniels should know." "I'm sorry." Daniel's gaze flicked to Claire, his anger momentarily redirected. You did the right thing, he said coldly. At least someone around here is honest. Jacob finally lost his composure, stepping between Emma and Daniel. That's enough, he said firmly. This isn't just about you, Daniel. Emma and I work together. We've built something important for this company. Don't let your jealousy ruin that. Daniel's jaw tightened. Jealousy? Is that what you think this is? My wife is hiding something from me, and you think I'm just jealous? Jacob didn't back down. Yes, because you can't stand the thought of Emma being close to anyone but you. Before anyone could react, Daniel lunged at Jacob, shoving him backward. Glasses shattered on the floor as guests gasped and scrambled to get out of the way. Stop it, Emma cried, stepping between them. Daniel, please. Tom and a few other men rushed forward, pulling Daniel and Jacob apart. Both men were breathing heavily, their faces flushed with anger. Sarah grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her aside. You need to calm him down before this gets worse, she whispered urgently. Emma nodded, her hands trembling. She turned to Daniel, her voice soft but firm. Daniel, please. Let's leave. We can talk about this at home. Daniel's eyes were still locked on Jacob, but he finally nodded. Fine. But this isn't over. He took Emma's hand and led her through the stunned crowd, leaving behind the shattered remains of what was supposed to be a joyful evening. The drive home was suffocatingly silent. The distant hum of tires on wet pavement was the only sound breaking the tension in the car. Emma sat stiffly, her hands wringing in her lap, while Daniel gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Emma opened her mouth several times, but the words wouldn't come. How could she explain something that had spiraled so far out of control? Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice strained and low. You're going to tell me everything. And I mean everything. Emma swallowed hard. There's nothing romantic between Jacob and me, Daniel. I swear. He's been helping me with, she hesitated, unsure of how to continue. With something personal? Daniel let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. Personal? Emma, do you have any idea how that looked? To me? To everyone at that party? He glanced at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pain. I walked into my worst nightmare tonight. Emma's throat tightened, tears welling in her eyes. I know how it looked, but you have to believe me. Jacob was just helping me with a project for the company. Something I didn't want to tell you about yet because I wanted it to be a surprise. Daniel's gaze flicked back to her, skeptical. A surprise? That's the best you've got? Emma, people don't whisper in corners, spend late nights together, and dance like that at a Christmas party for a surprise. Emma's voice cracked. I wasn't thinking. I was caught up in the excitement of it all, and I didn't realize how it would come across. I never meant to hurt you. Daniel pulled the car into their driveway and cut the engine. He sat in silence for a moment, staring at the darkened house. I need to know the truth, he said finally. Not just for me, but for us. Is there any part of this relationship with Jacob that I don't know about? Emma shook her head vehemently. No, Daniel. There's nothing beyond work. I love you. I only love you. He turned to face her, searching her eyes for any sign of deceit. His shoulders slumped slightly, the fight draining from him. Then why didn't you tell me? Why keep me in the dark? Because I was scared. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Scared that you'd misunderstand, that you'd see something that wasn't there. And tonight, that fear came true. Daniel sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if I can just forget what happened tonight. Trust doesn't come back overnight. Emma reached for his hand, her touch tentative. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild that trust. But I need you to believe me when I say I've done nothing to betray you. Daniel didn't pull away, but didn't respond either. He opened the car door and stepped out, standing in the cold night air. Emma followed, shivering as the chill hit her. We need time, he said finally. Time to figure out how to move forward. Back at the office, the fallout from the party was immediate and severe. Whispers filled the halls as employees speculated about what had happened between Emma, Daniel, and Jacob. The once festive atmosphere was now heavy with tension. Jacob's reputation took a significant hit. Some employees admired his professionalism and leadership, but others questioned his boundaries with Emma. Even his closest allies began to keep their distance, wary of being drawn into the drama. Emma, too, found herself the subject of gossip. She felt the weight of judgment in every glance and hushed conversation. Sarah, once a close friend, approached her hesitantly one morning. "Emma, I don't want to pry, but are you okay?" Sarah asked gently. Emma forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine. Just trying to get through this." Sarah nodded, but didn't press further. "If you need anything, I'm here." Despite Sarah's kindness, Emma felt isolated. She couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching, waiting for her to slip up. Jacob tried to clear the air during a staff meeting, addressing the rumors head-on. "What happened at the Christmas party was a misunderstanding. Emma and I were working on a confidential project that got misinterpreted. I apologize if it caused any discomfort." While some accepted his explanation, others remained unconvinced. The damage had been done, and trust was a hard thing to rebuild. At home, Daniel and Emma navigated their strained relationship with caution. Conversations were brief, and the warmth they once shared felt distant. Yet, amidst the tension, there were small signs of hope. One evening, Emma found Daniel sitting in the living room, flipping through old photo albums. She hesitated in the doorway before joining him. "Remember this?" he asked, pointing to a picture of them from their first Christmas together. Emma smiled softly. "I do. You were so excited about that ugly sweater contest." Daniel chuckled, the sound breaking through the lingering tension. "I still think I should have won." They sat in silence for a moment before Daniel spoke again. "I miss this. Us. Before all of this mess." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I miss it too, and I'm willing to fight for it if you are." Daniel looked at her, his expression softening. "I don't know how long it'll take, but I want to try." Emma nodded, a glimmer of hope igniting within her. "Me too." Months passed, but the memory of that fateful Christmas party lingered like a shadow over Emma and Daniel's lives. The initial storm had subsided, but the wounds were still healing, both individually and as a couple. Emma and Daniel had agreed to attend couples therapy, a decision neither took lightly. Their first few sessions were strained. Words they'd never dared speak to each other before came tumbling out in a raw, painful torrent. Emma revealed her fear of failure and her desire to make Daniel proud without leaning on his support. Daniel confessed his growing insecurities, hidden beneath a confident exterior, and how the party had shattered his trust in both Emma and himself. During one session, their therapist posed a question that hung heavily in the room. "What do you both truly want moving forward?" Daniel hesitated, his eyes meeting Emma's. "I want to trust her again. I want to believe that we can get back to where we were, but stronger." Emma's voice trembled. "I want the same, but I know trust isn't something we can rush. It has to be earned back, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Their honesty marked a turning point. Slowly they began to rebuild. Small gestures, morning coffee left on the counter, a hand resting on the other's shoulder, became symbols of their willingness to try again. They established new boundaries and communication patterns, learning to be open about their fears and needs. At work, Emma took proactive steps to address the damage done to her reputation. She openly communicated with her colleagues, dispelling rumors and clarifying the nature of her relationship with Jacob. More importantly, she took ownership of her mistakes, acknowledging how her actions had affected not just her marriage, but her professional credibility. Jacob, too, faced repercussions. Though he remained in his position, his once impeccable image had taken a hit. He distanced himself from Emma, focusing on repairing his standing within the company. Emma and Jacob's professional relationship became purely formal, devoid of the warmth and camaraderie they once shared. Surprisingly, this shift brought Emma closer to her other colleagues. The transparency she showed earned back some of their trust, though it was clear things would never fully return to the way they were before. At home, Daniel's perspective continued to evolve. There were days when doubts resurfaced, moments when he'd catch himself questioning Emma's sincerity. But then, he'd remember the effort she was putting in, the open conversations, the vulnerability she showed. One evening, Daniel found himself sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. Emma joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked quietly. Emma sighed. "More than I'd like to admit, but not because of Jacob or what people think. I think about how close I came to losing everything that mattered." Daniel nodded. "I think about it too, but not in the same way I used to. It's like that night broke us, but it also made us see what we were taking for granted." Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "It taught me that love isn't just about grand gestures or loyalty. It's about being honest, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Daniel wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "And it taught me that trust isn't given, it's built. Brick by brick." Their story became a cautionary tale among their social circle, a reminder of how fragile relationships can be. Friends who once viewed them as the perfect couple now saw them as human, flawed, but resilient. Sarah, Emma's colleague, mentioned it over coffee one day. "You and Daniel, you give me hope. You went through hell, and yet here you are, still fighting for each other." Emma smiled softly. "It hasn't been easy, but I think that's the point. Love isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be worth it." The Christmas party that nearly destroyed their marriage ended up reshaping it. Trust, once shattered, was being painstakingly rebuilt. Forgiveness was a slow process, requiring patience and vulnerability from both sides.